Yeah, I just don't know. I emailed student services. Because
I don't think the first few.
yeah,
because like this is what I'm still. And that's in the entirety.
I mean, there's more, but I've already done all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
This is just like the actual computer stuff. I started thinking about like this seems like really basic. Yeah, I'm kind of dry right now towards like it's like that part, and then it's like, are you? All my plans are just kind of like in flux now. Yeah, exactly.
Are you thinking for 500? Or a little boat?
Now we have to do like that. Which is like the state pays for it. You just like you still have to do fast stuff, and then they take your Telegram and then fast track. Yeah, they take or whatever's left over. And so with this, I was not having to do that because my program covered it. So
Yeah,
but now that like I remember we're all freaking.
Really?
Not so far. Well, no, I think
Yeah. So would you make
I see what you're. Yeah, that's the one I need to do. And then go down to this one. You have to do all three of those.
I think the way I have it, like nobody or just possible to get at the same time. No, I think like.
I know in this area,
Oh no, well, I think the way it has set out, you do one full semester, one the next semester while you're doing 51. So it's just the same time you're doing 70.
So you do one here and then you do about that one. Yeah. How's that? It's so boring. It's so hard. It's not hard. It's so boring.
Man, I didn't realize I should do that. I'm a crack.
Yeah, so she got kicked her. Yeah. No, what was it?
I think you
Well, I got a pretty strong phone, but every time she got back to her, that's how she got out. I just that I'm gonna set that whole way. Finish this and then. I'm telling you, I've been all over the place my whole life. Like I'm not.
I mean, I had 53, so like I was better than 53.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had several years more than the.
I'm telling you, dude, it's just like an all over the place.
Yeah.
My plan right now is to go to the next intern somewhere. I'm gonna talk to the guy later, and then we'll, we want to like months ago, and hopefully, while I'm working with this, I can just.
How's everybody today? Good, good. You guys are almost all here. If Daniel gets here, you have like everybody here. I'm gonna put on my rubber glove. So today I wanted to talk to you first about rubber duck debugging because let me add these people. I can never get a complete thought out before something interrupts me. Because we're going to be doing looping, repetition sometimes is an area where we might have bugs. So you might have to do some debugging. So over the years, they've come up with some solutions. Sometimes us programmers tend to run people off, not because of our personalities, but because we're always trying to talk about problems we're having in our program. Because we find that if we just explain it to somebody, we can figure out what's wrong. And they don't even have to understand what we're talking about. They just have to sit there and listen so that we can explain it to them. I had a friend that I worked with at Illiget and Platt, and I had this awful system that I had to take care of, and it was forever crashing. And she could tell in my eyes that I wanted to ask her questions about that system. And she would just be like, no, I don't understand it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't know it. And I'd be like, no, just listen, just let me explain. And she'd be, okay. And she'd just stand there like it was killing her. And I would figure out what the problem was, trying to explain it to her. But she was so mean about it. So what they've done over the years is they thought, you guys need an inanimate object to explain this stuff to, because your friends keep running away and your family. So rubber ducks are the solution. If you take a rubber duck and you set it here by your monitor or close to you, you can explain to it what's going on in your code. And they find that the majority of time, your rubber duck will help you solve your problem. Because as you're explaining it, you'll figure out where the problem is, because you're saying this line of code does this, and as you look at it, you're like, well, actually it doesn't, but that's what I wanted it to do, and so you can figure out what your problem is. So to help you guys with your debugging skills, I have rubber ducks for everybody, but we're gonna have to be careful about it, you know, because we got this COVID thing. So I'm just gonna grab them out with my rubber hands here and set them up so that you can pick out one that you like. But come on over and get you a CIS120 rubber duck. You might get them in other classes. Woo! Just depending. There's lots of duplicates. So if you do go, it's already out. Nobody wants this one. Bikini duck. Whoops, that. Studio duck. Okay, take him now. I don't think there's very many of them. You see what you want. No, I'm gonna ask that this morning. There's a bunch of birds in this batch. No kitty cat. I think you should invent a kitty cat rubber duck. It's obviously a duck. Oh, yeah. GMO duck.
Between that, the other year's looking more like that.
Everybody got one. Now you don't have to ask me to help. Just ask yourself. You can fill out the answer. Okay, this website's cute. Some important points here for you. Says if the ducks are so smart, why don't we let the ducks do all the work? We can't. You can learn more about rubber duck debugging at any of your major websites. That's about it. Okay, yay. So let's get to our collaboratory document we were working with last time. Couldn't get it installed. We'll go to Canvas and double click on that link to get it open so you can get started with it. That's all right, we'll get you all fixed up.
I should have. I think I actually got rid of this. Yeah, but it doesn't work.
Are you feeling better? Feeling better, baby?
Oh boy.
Oh boy. I had someone trade in their duck once because it didn't squeak. Found one that squeaked.
You guys work on this one? Yeah, we did. Okay. I was recovering. But am I able to get access to that? What you did, or I just? Okay, all right. So all we did was just create a copy and not work out.
There was a meme I saw. It was during this kid was talking. He was in
I really bad job.
Get it saved. Okay, so let's go here. When you look at your collab document, if you look at the table of contents, remember, we have all of the different items here. What I'll be doing when I grade these is I'll look at your table of contents and I'll be going to each of the student activities, clicking on them to make sure that you were able to complete that activity. We have quite a few things in here, so I'll be coming up with a grading plan as I grade and kind of trying to come up with something that's fair for everybody. And we left off last time. Where were we? Here we were. We had just worked with example 5.7. So if you can find that one in your table of contents, click on that student activity, that's where we left off. So in this one, I'd asked you for a flow chart. So you guys had worked on a flow chart using Raptor. And then we decided, meaning I decided, that we were going to go ahead and do it in Python too. So either one would be fine when I grade this. I wouldn't count off on this one because it doesn't have a flow chart. So does everybody have that Python code okay? Let's make sure. Now in this program, this little script was the first one we used that used a counter, right? We had a count controlled loop. So we have two variables here, an integer that we're prompting from our user. Whoops, I touched it. I didn't think I did, but I guess I did. And then a count. So our counter variable and our variable that we're going to ask the user for both start at 0. Now, some people have been confused about that, rightfully so. When we're working with pseudocode, we have to declare our integers. Any variable that we're going to use, we have to declare. That's because many programming languages require that. In Python, you don't have to declare variables. Python does not let you control the data type of a variable. So we can't say anything like positive integer as integer or anything that tells Python that's an integer. Python will decide on its own So when we say positive integer equals 0, that's basically declaring that variable, and we're saying, give it a value that's a number. So Python should say, oh, this is a number. So Python will assign the data type. So it's a little confusing of an area for us. So just remember, when you're looking at pseudocode, you're going to see us declaring all these variables. That's because most programming languages make us do that. It's just Python that is a little bit more advanced than that and doesn't require us to declare those variables. So it can cause some confusion for people. So I put these variables up here with an initial value to kind of account for that declare statement in our pseudocode, but I don't have to, right? I could just start using them here in my code, and that would be fine. Python would be okay with it. So that's just kind of an area that can really get to people. Now in this program, we're prompting for the integer that the user wants us to count up to. We're setting our counter to 1, and then we're going into our while loop. Notice a condition in our while loop. While the counter is less than or equal to the number the user entered, we want to print out our counter and our counter squared. Then we're going to add to it. So when we run this program, if you remember, we come out with 1, 1 squared is 1, and 2, 2 squared is 4. So this first column is the value of our count variable as it's going through the loop. The second column is the count variable squared. So this loop is a really good example of things like that for you. So it can be something that you might want to use. So let's look at this next one. In example 5.8, we're going to have a counter, but we're going to start with a value that's higher, and then we're going to decrement our counter or bring it down. So let's write this one. On this one, we're going to need how many variables? Do I need 2 variables like that last program, or just 1? I'm going to start with my comments, and I'm going to go ahead and put the example number in there. And this is going to be the countdown. So our counter is going to go down or decrement instead of going up. So just to be nice, I'm going to go ahead and initialize variables. So looking at this code, what variables do we need? Count? That's right. Any others? Doesn't look like we need any others, do we? So we'll start count equals 0. It's amazing kind of that our pseudocode is kind of harder than our Python code, but that is the way it is. Now we set our count equals 0 to kind of start it, to declare it as a variable, but they actually want it to be 100. So I'll say update the value of count. Next, we want to print out a message, countdown in dot, dot, dot. Now, if you notice, I'm putting comments kind of on each line of code. And as a beginning programmer, that's a really good idea for you. I don't do it often because sometimes it can be confusing for students with all these comments and all this code and stuff. So I usually kind of just code chatter. I talk as I'm coding to make you guys understand what's going on. But it's nice to have the comments to look back on. So please be commenting your code with what you feel comfortable with so that you can remind yourself what something did when you look at it later. Now, after we print out our message, let's go into a countdown loop. So I want a while statement. And while our count is greater than 0, that's going to be the condition of our loop. We'll print just the value of our counter, and then we'll subtract from it. So count equals count minus 1. Again, to continue commenting, I'll do it off to the side, print out the value of count, and then subtract 1 from the value of count. Now, if I look back, oh, they wanted the word seconds after that counter. I left that out. I better add that in. So count plus seconds. That ends our loop. So I'm going to back tab and print blast off. And we'll put a comment there that we're going to print a final message. Beautiful, let's run it, see if it works. Mine gets to line 15. How about yours? So what's it complaining about? Saying I'm doing a plus, and in your plus, you're trying to use an integer and a string. Do you remember how we fixed that? Yep, cast our integer as a string. So we just wrap it with our str string function. So it'll convert that integer to a string, and then we can add it to another string doing concatenation. So remember, we were using a comma, and when we used the comma, Python didn't care. But as soon as we change it and start using a plus sign for our concatenation, then we have to do that casting as a string. Okay, now I see a problem. I need a space before my S. So I'll run it again and see how that looks. Oh, that's better. Now I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom and kind of make sure it worked. It did. Ooh, I don't like that. It says 1 second. Is that okay? No. People are going to complain. How can we fix that? to where the 1 just said 1 second. Exactly. Let's put it in an if statement. Now our if statement, it would have to go within our while loop, right? So we would have to say if count equals 1, print the word count plus the word second, else print the one with the S. Now, what about subtracting from our count? Should that be part of our else clause? Let's do it. Feels to me like it should, because I want to cause some trouble. So let's run that. So I'm just getting a bunch of 1 seconds. How do we make that into an infinite loop? If I go way back, I should see at the beginning that it counts down from 100, but it's looping so fast with that 1 that I can't even get there. So I'm going to click this stop icon to try to make it stop. Stop. Didn't want to stop. There, I finally got it to stop. Do get it to stop, because if you don't get it to stop, Colab doesn't respond to you properly as you're trying to make your changes. Now, what happened? Why did that go into an infinite loop? Because we are only subtracting 1 from our counter if our counter is not equal to 1. Once our counter got to 1, we started printing out this new message that wasn't plural, just 1 second, but we never subtracted from our counter again. So it never got to 0. So we can create an infinite loop like that. The one we created last time was really obvious. This one is a little more hidden. So we want to make sure that we do our counter update outside of our if statement, that no matter what the current value is of our count, we go ahead and subtract from it. And that's just a matter of indentation in Python, so it can be an easy mistake to make. Let's run it again, and now we should see it end properly, saying 1 second, last off. Now, if you want to get rid of this output, this icon here that sort of looks like a download icon, you can click it and it'll clear all of your output. But then it kind of makes it look like you lost your stuff, so you have to scroll back up to find it. Did everybody's work? We need to fix any? Beautiful. Okay, if everybody's worked. With 5.9, I'm going to have you guys work on that one on your own. So we're going to go to the for loop. So if you click in your table of contents on the for loop, the 5.3, the for loop, we'll get into that area. Looks like we have some that need to be fixed. Did you find it? Got it? You got that?
It's only counting odd numbers. Yeah, mine's doing something.
Did you find it?
It's only counting odd numbers, so it's 99, 97, 95, 93.
Oh, let's share that. That looks like, sounds like a good one to share with everybody. Let's see what's going on. Can you share it with us? Because that's a good one. You see it?
Yes. This is two count.
Yep, we're subtracting from it up here and down here. Good job.
So should I take up one at the top and bottom, or which one?
Just whichever one you like.
Okay.
Does it matter? Let me ask that question again. Does it matter whether he deletes the one on the top and the bottom? Can you control Z and put that back? Put that back. There we go. Now, say that again. Does it matter which one he deletes? Yes, it does. Look at that code. Why does it matter?
You want to take it out at the end of it, or subtract it.
No? Why? What am I going to print if I've already subtracted from the counter before I print? I'm going to print the next one, not this one. Right? So we can't subtract until we print it out, or else we'll miss one. Right? We'll never print out that 100 or something. But we have to do it in whatever order our loop calls for. So in this case, since we're starting our count at 0 and we want, or I mean at 100, and we want the first printout to be 100, we can't subtract until after we've done that print.
Well, I have like that in the beginning and the end. And it's still working. It's not counting that out.
So let's see yours. Let's see why. Thank you.
I'm not on the Zoom.
Let's see another one. And
I'm not on the Zoom.
you're not on the Zoom. Well, then we can't help you. What's he doing? If he's got 2 subtractions and it's working right, what's he doing? He has it in the if statement and in the else statement. So it's working properly. It's just not the best because we really only want that to happen one time. We don't want duplicate code. So good job. Okay, so our for loop, are you ready to look at it? Because if you're still thinking about this one, you're not going to be thinking about the for loop, and I want you to be thinking about the for loop. Because the for loop is kind of weird and kind of difficult to use at first. It makes perfect sense, but it can kind of give you a little bit of a hiccup if you're not thinking about it when you start. Remember our loops, remember our musical chairs? We said that before we started a loop, we have to initialize to get it set up properly. During our loop, we have to update, which remember taking a chair away every time the music stops. And third, we have to have a test condition. Do we still have people? Are there still chairs? Whatever our test condition is in musical chairs. Well, we saw with our while loop, each of those things are pretty manageable. With a for loop, the programming language is going to merge all of those things together and kind of take care of a little of that housekeeping for us. So in a for loop, we're going to have 3 things included in this one statement. First of all, our keyword is going to be for, and then we're going to be specifying a variable that's going to control this for loop. In this case, it's counter. We're going to specify the variable name and its initial value. Then we're going to specify the test condition, like till counter is greater than 10 or whatever. And we're going to specify the update, that every time this loop executes, we want to update the counter. So each of these items is specified in a for loop. The reason they have the semicolons in between each of those pieces is because that's how a lot of programming languages do it. So C#, Java, a lot of the type-specific programming languages will put initial value semicolon, test condition semicolon, and then the variable to update. So that's why our pseudocode has it in this format. Python doesn't really use that kind of format for a for loop. So if you're doing pseudocode and you're putting a for loop in there, I'll take it either way. Now, let's do this first one, example 5, 10. I'm going to add a code block because I didn't add one here. So this isn't really a student activity that I'm going to be grading. I just want to get our very first for loop down. So I'll put a comment block in there and say first for loop. Now I said Python syntax is way different. So let's go find it. I'm gonna go search for Python for loop. Remember to always put your language first. So if I'm searching for C# for loop, I'm gonna type C# for loop. If I'm looking for stuff with Python, I'm gonna put the word Python first so that I can find the right help. Because I don't wanna dig through a whole bunch of helpful information when it's not for the language I'm using. W3 Schools is always a good source and it popped up right at the top. So I'll take a look at it. When I look at this W3 Schools article though, a lot of stuff is talking about lists. We haven't talked about lists yet. They're easy enough to use, but that's not really what I'm interested in at this point. So I'm gonna kind of scroll down. This is an area where you need a little bit of help from your instructor to get started to know what you're looking for. So I wanna look for the range parameter of the for loop. So this is kind of what we're talking about. We said in that for loop that we were looking at in our pseudocode that the variable name was counter. In this for loop, the variable name is x. So Python is going to set up a variable named x, and it's going to set its initial value to 2, and it's going to execute this loop until its value gets to 6. And Python's automatically going to add 1 every time it executes it to x. So let's look at this one down here. Here again, we have the same thing, a variable named x. We're going to start x with a value of 2, and we're going to loop until it gets to a value of 30. But for every loop, we're going to add 3 to it instead of adding 1. So that's why we have that third parameter in that bottom example. So let's try it. We see there what we need for our for loop. We're going to say for, and we want our variable name to be count. And then we have to have that keyword in, and then another keyword, range, because we're doing a range loop, starting at one number and incrementing throughout a range from our beginning to our end. So in our example, they wanted to start at 1, and they want to end at 4. Our count is going to be 1, so we don't need to specify that for Python. Our for loop does need to end with a colon because it has a body. And so in this for loop, we're just going to print out the value of our counter variable. So Python is going to take care of it for us. Let's run it and watch it. So I see 1, 2, and 3, the value of my count variable. Let's copy those 2 lines of code. And let's go to our Python tutor site.
For some reason, I'm going to use syntax. I have no clue why. And line 4 with range 1 and 4. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I just corrected a few small mistakes.
You see it?
I'm kind of an idiot.
You finding it? To get you? All right. So let's visualize execution of just these 2 lines of code. Starts out at the end of my comments, and then it's going to go into my for loop. When I click next, we should see our count variable, and it has a value of 1. Now, when I click next, it's going to execute this print statement. So I should see that 1 get output. Yep, there it is. Now it's back to my for loop again. It's checking that range. It's like, is the count less than this ending number? Yes, it is. So we should see it go into our loop again. And now the count is equal to 2. When we click next, we'll print that. Now we should have another execution. We've got our count at 3. We'll print it. Now, this is the big question. with our for loop using this range parameter in Python, does count having a value of 4 execute our loop? Nope, it ends it. So whenever you're looking at this ending value, that's a greater than or equal to. So once it gets to that number, it quits executing the loop. So if I wanted number 4 to come out, I would have to make that ending range value 5. Okay, so for loops, the range parameter in Python takes care of a lot for us. Let's try this one. 5.11. Now this one does have a student activity section, so let's fix it. So I'm going to say this is exercise 5.11 and incremental for loop. Use a for loop that increments by more than 1. So we don't really need a lot here. It's going to be just kind of like that last one. Our main goal is to get our for loop coded properly. So again, we're using a variable named count for count in range. Now for this example, our range should start at 0. They said it should run while it's less than or equal to 15. But we want to change our increment. So instead of incrementing by 1, we want to increment by 5. And then I can print out my count. Now I've got those all squished up against each other. It shouldn't matter. But if I want it to look easier to read, I can put spaces. Let's try it. So we got our 0 and 5 and 10 because we're counting by 5 here. That's what we said our increment should be. And we said to end when you get to 15. So that's why we didn't get 15 output. Look good? Everybody's working okay? Okay, there's a few more examples that are for loops. Let's look at them. You can tell I'm going to leave these to you. So for 5.12, it's another small for loop. But in this case, we want to start with a high number, end with a low number, and we want our increment value to be negative. So that one will be very similar to the one we just did. Next, 5.13, we want to use a variable to control our for loop instead of just having the number coded in our for loop. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Nine of them for you to do with your group. Now, I'm going to give you the rest of the time that we have, and these are due Sunday night. But I want you guys to stay in communication with me if you're having trouble with some of these, because this is the first time I've ever done anything this way. I think you guys can all handle it, but I think that I'll change the due date to be Monday night so that you can let me know Monday if you're having any problems and we can resolve those and get them all going. Now, some of these at the very end are bigger. But most of them are pretty small, just like these little ones we've done so far. If you find yourself spending hours trying to figure them out, you need to stop and ask for help. Ask your study group for help, ask me for help, because these are small and short and shouldn't take you that kind of time, okay? So if there's a problem, let me know. Any questions before I leave you to it? You got your doc, you got your study group. You might have everything you need. Yes, sir? Sure, yeah, I'll put it back up there. And remember, you might have to use the Google to find some stuff. So let me know if you need anything. Everybody is here, so I'm going to shut off this Zoom session. After everybody's got this one. Do you all have it? Okay, I'm going to wait. And Brendan, just work on these new ones with your group today, and you can go backwards on those old ones later when you.
And I wanted to say really quickly, I'm working on the test today, actually.
Okay.
I'm having some tutoring help today with it because there's a lot of stuff that I'm just not understanding about the class.
Yeah.
Like, I'm able to do the exercises, but when I'm actually doing it on my own, completely lost.
Right, that's how a lot of people.
Yeah, I can tell why this wasn't my major, so I'm just gonna get some help on that, and hopefully I can get a general idea.
Just remember, you gotta push yourself.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, try to figure it out, because a lot of times you're answering questions like you know what's going on. It's just when you're by yourself, like you said.
Yeah, sure. It's like when I'm trying to think of a general idea of programming, like before I started programming, that was the question I asked myself. What is a general idea of how programming works, what it is, how it's done? And I just couldn't come to a consecutive answer. And I kind of struggled with that. It's like how I'm going into a class and I don't even have an answer for what I'm doing.
That's all right.
Yeah.
You're doing great, I think. So having all of your wisdom teeth cut out can definitely set you back.
Yeah. I was only on the Zoom session for a bit because my job was inflated, and it just hurt like hell. So I was sitting on the ice for like
I don't know about your Earl switches, but they sometimes downplay it and act like it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And then you're down for a week.
I mean, I vomited blood for a few hours, so that was fine.
It's bad.
Yeah, it was horrible, honestly. I'm not gonna forget that for a while.
No, it's awful. So yeah, just let yourself recover.
Don't feel guilty for me, by the way.
Oh, don't worry, I won't.
What I mean by that is feel like, oh, he had wisdom teeth surgery.
No, don't worry, I don't
I
feel bad about it at all. You decided to do it, it's all on you.
Yeah. I needed it, honestly.
Yeah.
And